This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Welcome to the EDIC meeting for Tuesday, April 15th, tax day. For those who celebrate, happy day. First things on the docket, I believe we have some minutes to approve from previous meetings. Cassie, am I right? Do we have January or February as well as March?
January and March need to be approved. March was distributed. I have failed as your clerk due to versioning issues.
Okay.
The January minutes are lost to history.
Well, the good thing is we have a video recording, so
I could watch it. You're right. Okay.
That is just a fact. That is not necessarily a request. I think it would be good to have minutes for January posted for the purposes of posterity.
Yes.
I'm getting a bunch of echo. Who am I getting echo? So that's my thought on that. What are your thoughts on that, Cassie?
My professional thoughts are that, yes, I will certainly do that. My private thoughts are that I have to watch an 8-hour school committee meeting, but that's okay. 1 hour is nothing compared to 8.
That's true. And I bet it even ended early.
I have no problem doing it. I'm just being cranky.
I appreciate
the marks
it.
Are ready to approve. Review and approve.
All right. Has everybody had a chance to look at the March minutes that Cassie sent today, I believe?
Yes, I would make a motion to approve the March minutes.
Great. Do we have a second to approve?
Dave is up there seconding. Dave Kutcher.
Excellent. All right. Well, any further discussion before we get into this? All right. All in favor, holler aye / give me a physical sign that you are in favor of approving the March minutes. Thank you so much.
All right.
Motion passes. I really should open the agenda for today. Just going off a muscle memory right now. And hello. 15. All right, what's the answer? The next topic is probably a discussion of some kind. It might include updates from the planning department, since I don't see any members of the public here for public speak. Yeah, planning department updates. Thanks for joining us once again.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Absolutely. So just before you join, I got the question, anything new in planning? And it's like I have to think like what have I told you about and what happened? So I'll just give you the rundown. And by we I mean the city's consultant and our engineers and my staff member Johanna Stacy submitted an application for a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant for slope stabilization and
excuse me, can you repeat what you said?
Me? Yeah, there's a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure where it's coming from. Hang on.
Tom, can you mute?
Yeah, I think we've improved. Okay, Allison, you're good.
Okay. Not getting the feedback anymore. We're good. Okay. So the this city, with help from the consultant, submitted an MVP grant, which is a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant to do some work on Emerald Place. That will include some slope stabilization, the construction of a shared use path along the side there, new pavement, and new water lines. So that hopefully we'll get that grant and we'll match it with community development block grant funds. which brings me to the next point, which is that tonight at 6 p.m. at Eastworks, the city's having a public engagement process to share the designs for the 2 parks in the new city neighborhood. One is the existing park on the corner of Parsons and Federal Street, and the other is behind the old Parsons School. The city, when we sold that, we retained the back part where there was like the bus turnaround. And so the plan is to turn that into more of a formal park with an actual playground, some informal space, basketball. So that doesn't have funding to be constructed at this point, but it will be coming hopefully within, the next few years. So that's tonight, like I said, at 6 p.m. I think it's room 116 at Eastworks. And that's all, it's just in person. It's not a remote meeting or a hybrid meeting. Let's see. Tomorrow night at the city council, the Easthampton, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Easthampton Futures Project. That was sort of like the arts master plan for the city that was done about 5 years ago. And it's a 10-year plan. So as like sort of to mark its 5-year, to mark that it's been 5 years, Pascalina Azzarello, who's the director of arts and culture for the city, did a big presentation at City Space. So here's the other piece of it. When it was finished, it was like supposed to be rolled out on like March 12th of 2020. So they didn't get to do this big formal and big unveiling of the outcome of that. So this 5-year sort of revisit was like a more formal way to introduce the plan to a lot of people. And it was actually really great to see how much of it was still like relevant and held up over all this time, especially with all the changes in the world. So it's still, it's still a really excellent document, and it's a living document. It's, subject to change and comments and suggestions as time goes on. But anyways, so tomorrow night at City Council at 6 p.m., Pascalina and Councillor Denham and Councillor Jadzik, I think, are going to sponsor a resolution that the City Council will ideally support, kind of adopting that plan and just sort of supporting the arts community in general in the city. They're such an important part of like the backbone of our economy here. And it is sort of like a fragile thing that, especially with the, housing prices and everything going up and people being pushed out, that we really want to show our support and try to continue to do things that are meaningful to support them, not just like talk about it, but to actually do some things. So if anybody's at the council meeting tomorrow night, you'll get an opportunity to hear a little bit more about that. I could go on all night. I don't know if there's specific topics that you wanted me to hit on. If anybody has any questions about things that they know are ongoing, there's a million things in the works. So
Great. Thank you for that. I have a question, which is a follow-up to the community development block grant meeting that happened. I just turned off my light. Good job, Nate. There we go. So I went to that meeting after our last meeting, the community development block grant meeting about the new city infrastructure project. And I'll preface it just by saying every time I've ever been to any planning department's event, I am always impressed by how measured every person's response is to people who are coming with like frustrations and difficulties understanding the how we got to this point, what your planning process has been moving forward, what's going to happen. And I heard a number of people say that they perceived that there had been not enough outreach to people who lived in that neighborhood. And I also heard people say, why isn't this a hybrid meeting? Because there are so many older residents who just cannot / will not figure out how to engage in a digitally based meeting. And I'm really interested in how your team debriefed that, what your thoughts are about that in general. What are the moving forward thoughts about how those meetings, literally the format, the venue?
Mhm. Yeah, so I wasn't there. I had another meeting that night and I can't even remember what it was, but I wasn't able to be there, but I did hear about it immediately after the fact. Johanna had reached out to let me and the mayor know. And that is part of the reason why the meeting tonight is in person. It was in reaction to that and wanting to give people an opportunity to have the face-to-face conversations. And it, unfortunately, it can't be hybrid just because of the format. It's like an open house style. So it's, I mean, there's no way to really do a hybrid for that. But moving forward, the community development block grant hearings, like the one that we're talking about, will be hybrid.
I think that's great. I think it's a little more of a hassle to logistically manage, and the ones that we had in person in days of yore were, the similar kind of diversity of experiences and opinions, and also it felt like there was a wider demographic represented at those in-person meetings than was definitely available on that digital meeting. So I think that's great. That's the end of my comment for the moment. Are there other things others would like to talk about?
Yeah. Allison, I was just wondering where the project on Main Street, 385 Main Street stood. I know that, I don't know if that's got to your desk or not. I know it was going to zoning. I'm not sure where that all stands.
We're talking about the community builders, the large, yeah. So they were, I literally just came from a meeting with them, so it's funny you asked. It was appealed. The comprehensive permit that the zoning board issued was appealed, and they're still in that appeals process. While they do that, they've been working on their stormwater management plan, which the Conservation Commission will review next month. So we were just kind of touching base on that. Kestrel Land Trust, who is buying the back half, or more than half, the back lands, I guess you could call them, they submitted a plan to divide up the lot, which will be reviewed tonight by the planning board. And they're moving forward with their, grant and everything that they needed to buy that. So things are still moving. I think the appeal is gonna, continue to slow things down, but they haven't thrown in the towel or anything at this point.
Good. Thank you.
I think I saw also, just passing through on Facebook, has anything changed at the Maple Street school site in the recent last few weeks? Something about the playground being torn down. Is there an update about any of the school sites?
No, unfortunately, that's really still just totally stagnant. I know the Maple Street School parking lot is going to be, if not already, used as temporary storage for some Jersey barriers that will be for cultural chaos. So I don't know if people saw construction vehicles unloading those and maybe thought something was going on more than what is. Yeah, I don't know if those are there yet. They might be. Greg from the DPW was arranging that. And I know Pascalina had wanted to do some sort of event to have the community maybe paint them. So there might be a little activity there. But yeah, it's all just kind of related to cultural chaos and city stuff. It's not anything with the housing development, unfortunately.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, send up a smoke signal when you hear something so that we can all get excited, would you? That'd be great.
Yeah, I know. I think, the tax credit situation is just really, really challenging for all the developers in town right now to deal with.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions for Allison or requests for information about new things?
No plans submitted, Allison, for Pleasant Street?
No, I don't actually know really the full depth of where that stands. I just know that Kevin Perrier, who is buying, or actually I think he closed on the property, is looking at a May meeting for the planning board to review plans, but we have not gotten anything submitted yet.
Okay, good.
Oh, so related, sort of the Tasty Top site, they did start work on the bank building. I'm sure people probably saw some activity there. They are only able to work on the bank at this stage. The bank is connecting to the sewer in Route 10, whereas the rest of the development needs to connect off to the back of the property, and it requires an easement over private property, which they don't have yet. So besides the bank, I don't really see much more happening in the immediate future. Hopefully that changes, but they haven't given it any indication that they're moving on it.
And Allison, from what I saw in real estate transactions, the bank actually purchased their parcel. So they are kind of independent of that whole development, from what I understand.
Sort of. Their permits, like their land use permitting, is all tied up in the overall development, which was why they were held up by the developer not paying for the third party review. That's for stormwater management and the wetlands crossing and some other environmental sensitivities on the site. He wasn't submitting that money, and it was holding up the bank. And I think once the bank figured that out, they were able to resolve it and move forward. But yes, it's separate in the sense that it's has a separate owner and a separate contractor too, I believe.
Just for the record, we don't usually say hold up and bank in the same sentence.
Yeah, I think they really were eager to get moving.
Oh, God, ever with the levity. All right, Brown. Okay. Thank you, Allison. Appreciate it. Cassie, do you have anything to share with us related to climate action plan stuff? You're muted, lady.
Oh, bushra. Jimmy Pocket's going to take the kind of climate action plan update to the city council. My understanding is at the next meeting. In any case, yep, Edith is going to sign the letter. Dave, hoping you have an update on the chamber head. We have new artwork. Do you want to see it? I'll show you.
Heck yeah, we do.
Let's see. Will you let me share my screen?
Well, great question. Let me work on it. Please hold. Make a co-host. You may now share your screen.
Choose what to share. Hey, this is it. Share. Do you see it? That's it. I did it.
Yeah, you did it.
I'm always impressed when I push the right sequence of buttons. So it's going to be a standard logo for the action plan and then customized for the different initiatives. So this will be the logo for the business partners.
Okay.
And we are going to go to Lindsay and the mayor for money for those. So that's it. That's my update.
Cool. And can you remind us who designed these?
The new person she works under Public Works, but
Okay.
the new sustainability coordinator, whose name is,
Sophie Protano.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I can just add on, the rest of it we're calling the Easthampton Climate Outreach Initiative.
I love that.
Yeah, so you'll probably be seeing some more hashtags with that, events with that hashtag on it. And we are doing the rain barrels again this year. I just want to throw that out there.
Terrific.
That's great. Cool. Thank you. Good work, Eckhoff.
It's moving slowly, but it's moving.
Yeah. Listen, this is municipal work. If you came here for speed, you are in the wrong meeting. Okay. Wayfinding at the mills. We sort of touched on that. No. Pleasant Street. No, that's a different thing.
So I'm going to be applying for a grant, a Mass Downtown Initiative grant to finalize, or not finalize, but like do a phase 2 of the original wayfinding study report that was done in 2020. It wasn't detailed enough to actually fabricate signs, and it didn't have very specific recommendations about where to put signs and what to have on them, et cetera, et cetera. So I will be submitting a grant to get that underway, and then hopefully from there we'll be able to find some money to have signs fabricated and installed. And it won't just be the Mill District, but it will include the Mill District.
Cool. In case you don't get the money for figuring out where to put the signs, those of us who were in those conversations at the time have very strong opinions. So please let us know. We're
Well,
happy to for
There
free.
will definitely be a public process associated with it, so you'll have an opportunity to
I will volunteer to hold signs
Wonderful.
for a while. Just so you could do it.
Oh, that's
Just,
good. That's a good use of your
just
height.
you can see
Yep.
like traffic flow. I will hold the signs.
Outstanding. Is there anything else in previous / our evergreen topics, housing related, anything else related that are worth talking about before we get into the thing that I want to talk more about as a group, before we make a group level statement? Hello, dog.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if I can ask it. But I'm curious how much the city, I'm thinking about the money for the signs. How much does the city rely on federal funds?
Well, there's federal funds that go into so many different things. Do you mean just like generally, or from like a transportation perspective, or?
What would be our areas of vulnerability if we were to lose federal funding generically?
Yeah, the schools, I think, are probably the biggest concern. Well, I don't want to say the biggest concern, but it's definitely a concern. The block grant, the community development block grant that we get pretty much every year is actually federal money. It's funneled down through the state, but it does originate in the federal government. So that program has been around since the 80s, and it's very popular, and I like relatively non-controversial, I would say. So we're hopeful that it won't be impacted, but it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to say for sure. A lot of our grants that we go for are state grants, though. So, it's like a trickle down effect, like if the state's not getting the money from the federal government, then we're at risk. But it's so unpredictable that it's just hard to say. And I try not to like dwell on it, because you can sort of like go to worst case scenario, but that's not helpful day to day. So I'm just kind of trying to take it one day at a time.
That's very helpful.
Question. All right. So the more specific topic, and I'll be honest, I don't have a ton based on recent city level public conversations about this. But at our last meeting, I brought this on myself, right? So I brought up the idea that we got this temporary, at minimum, cease and desist about short-term rentals. And we've had conversations on EDIC about short-term rentals in the past. And I believe we talked last time about how Dave and I would go write a statement. And then I was like, you know what? I haven't even talked to Dave about it since that time. I'm not prepared to write a statement that comes from EDIC, because I don't feel like we have an EDIC level understanding of what we believe is worth saying. And also, it is true, I have not watched all of the meetings that have happened this month about the short-term rentals. So what I'm wondering is two things. One, is it worth it to write an EDIC level statement about diversity of housing types in town? versus having a letter of support specifically about a current topic? If yes to either of those, what are the next steps to get us to that point? I think I would probably want to talk to the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. I would want to look at the Easthampton housing plan, and then think about the EDIC perspective, which is different from that. Is we are about building a sustainable economic environment for the city of Easthampton. We are enthusiastic about that. So what are the considerations we should have available to us when we are crafting such statements? So those are my thoughts. I invite your responsive thoughts.
I think when our history has been, we've always written letters case by case. Never really written a blanket letter, because I think something is always needed, for lack of a better phrase, in the heat of the moment. So when there's a project before the city, or a zoning amendment or something before the city, if EDIC had written a general letter of support for housing diversity, 6 months ago, it would probably be totally overlooked. So I personally think, whether it's a letter or whether it's bodies and chairs at meetings, I personally think we still have to look at that case by case. And when I saw the mayor's notification of putting any cease and desist on hold, I believe that's in lieu of a zoning decision that should be forthcoming. So again, should we, when that hits a zoning agenda for discussion, should we write a specific letter then, if it's something we support, and or show up at the meeting?
Right. That is, yeah. Okay. Other thoughts about that while I go look in my email for what I think is an upcoming zoning board meeting about it?
I just could probably shed a little light on the status of things if you'd like. So the original appeal to the zoning board was continued until like October, to allow this ordinance amendment process to play out. Subsequently, a couple of operators in town submitted appeals of their own, basically just to reserve their right to appeal, because there is only so many days after you receive the building commissioner's determination or decision or whatever, enforcement action, whatever it may be. There's only so many days that you have to appeal it. So they're doing that. We hope and expect with the same intent of allowing it to be continued until a later date, so that the zoning board of appeals doesn't have to make a determination in the meantime. The ordinance committee met last night about it. We heard from building, fire, and police some feedback. I think there's maybe a few changes that might result from that, but I do think it's inching closer to being in a form that will be a more formal submittal, which will then start the public hearing process.
Okay, so the email that I have from April 3rd from Dylan about the April 23rd ZBA public hearing, that's what you're saying has been continued to October?
So the prior meeting was 14 Taft Ave, and that was continued to October.
So these other ones are different properties.
Yeah, they're different properties, same issue, same exact kind of issue, just different properties. But again, we're hoping it will follow the same sort of trajectory.
Okay. So if we were to have some kind of something to say about this particular issue, we don't have to have it in the next week. Great.
No, I mean, there's going to be a lengthy public hearing process. Right now, the bulk of the regulations are in a general city ordinance, but there will have to be a zoning ordinance amendment associated with it. So the planning board will have a public hearing as well as the city council public hearings.
Okay.
So lots of opportunity, I think.
Okay. All right. So knowing that we have longer than a month to a week to think about this. Is this something that we would like to take up as something to have an opinion about as EDIC? Short-term rentals as part of the housing inventory in Easthampton.
Gwen, I would go back to what I think you might have said originally is, do we know enough about it to make a statement?
Right. That I think one of them is, do we feel like this is in our purview and we should have something to say about it? I mean, technically short-term rentals are a business, right?
Yes.
So that's economic development of a kind. And then do we know enough about it to make a statement? I think they're of a piece, but neither one is sufficient.
I think we know enough to make a blanket statement in support of, I mean, I'm in support of, but if we are in support of this, then saying like we are in support of the concept of short-term rentals in our city for X, Y, and Z reasons as they support the local economy. Support and contribute to the local economy.
Yeah, and I think I wonder. So here's what I have in my head. Full transparency. One of the last times we talked about this was probably, I don't know, 6 years ago. And I have Chris Korzak, however he says his last name. I'm never going to get it right from moment to moment. His voice in my head saying something about getting to a point where you have a ton of them, a ton of short-term rentals, a ton of Airbnbs that are now not available for people to live in. And do we have an opinion about that? And is that a thing that would be handled by the market, or is it not? And we had conversations about, well, imagine a world where you get grandfathered in at a certain date, and then we put a cap on how many Airbnbs there can be in a city. Like, how are you going to track that in the first place? And because you happened to be alive at a certain time and have the house at that certain time, you got in under the cap, and then anybody else who wants to have that after can't have one because you've already met the cap. All of those things are in my head about that. So that is not a coherent framework, which is why I am bringing it to this group to say, I agree, Dave, that we probably, in theory, conceptually, are for the idea of short-term rentals. And is that a useful thing to say on its own? Is there anything else to offer to a group that is considering what to do about what brought this issue to the fore in the first place?
I mean, I think it's completely fair of us to say we understand that there might be a need for regulation, for inspections, for certification, for all of those things in order to regulate this. But I think it's necessary to have a business voice that says these do contribute. They don't just take housing off of the market or consolidation of housing behind, certain landlords, et cetera, which is how they're often portrayed. I think it is necessary to have a business forward perspective on the situation that can also say, yes, we understand, there is both a need, but also a need for regulation as well.
Okay. Other thoughts about this particular set of questions? Tom, you're muted, sir.
Of all these people at the Cape that own their houses and rent them out throughout the summer, boy, I'm not aware of any regulations. Maybe there are that I just don't know. I have several friends that have homes at the Cape. They rent them out regularly for a week or two at a time. I'm not sure of any, if that's considered short-term rental. I'm not even aware of any regulations. So I guess I had a couple questions. Maybe Allison knows. One is, I don't even know what started this whole thing. Maybe somebody complained. But secondly, if I went to Florida for 3 months and decided I was going to rent my house to a friend, I can't do that by right.
Yeah, so I can answer both of those. First question, how was this started? The building commissioner received a complaint about one of the short-term rentals in town, and in investigating that, looked at zoning to see if it was even allowed. And the zoning ordinance, in his opinion, does not provide for short-term rentals. And therefore he issued these determination letters to all of the short-term rental operators in the city. Your second question, anything over, the city has the ability to define it, but I think the state's regulation is that anything over 30 days is not a short-term rental. So a month-to-month rental is not a short-term rental. It's just housing. Anything less than 30 days, less than a month, is what constitutes a short-term rental. The Cape and the Berkshires and a lot of like the vacation hotspots have definitely been dealing with this over the last handful of years, and do have regulations. I don't know the extent of them necessarily, but there is a push now for more registration of these so that police and fire know where they are and can set certain requirements. Like one of the things that's being talked about is having like an exit plan posted in the rental so that people who are unfamiliar know how to get out if there's an emergency. So those types of things, they're going to probably do inspections. I don't know if it'll be yearly or not. That's still sort of being decided. And I know the state legislatures are also considering doing something at the state level with regards to inspections. That came up last night. So yeah, it's a wide-ranging issue that has become more prominent, I think, over the last 5 years or so. It's not just us that's dealing with it by any means, with the regulatory piece of it, that is. Yeah.
Okay. And again, I don't know enough about the downside of this, but back to Dave's point a little bit about we can just blanketly support this, but all I know is when I was in Maui a year ago, there was a huge uproar about short-term housing because it was apparently somehow impacting people from getting full-time housing. And that's just, I just don't want the EDIC to get some sort of black eye over this because, and again, that may not affect us here. Obviously, we didn't have the devastation that Maui did and all the issues that went with that. But I just want to make sure there's not a downside to this that we're not aware of, that we get a black eye without knowing all the facts.
Right. On the one hand, we're not a tropical paradise, and on the other, so it doesn't feel like it's an imminent threat to be inundated with that kind of short-term rental needing tourism, and don't want to contribute to a considerable lack of housing. Okay, hands up in order, David Kutcher and then Dave Delvecchio.
I mean, if you look at it, we have no short-term rental housing besides Airbnbs in our city. And even then we have maybe a little bit in Holyoke, but there's quite literally, we have no hotels whatsoever in our city. So if someone were to come to Easthampton, they can't stay in Easthampton if there's no Airbnbs. I don't see a market problem. I mean, it's, yes, if we get to the point where Easthampton is a vacation destination and suddenly people are scooping up housing in order to build short-term rentals, at which point you hope that the market fixes that problem. Right now, we just don't have anything here.
Yeah, it's a point well taken. Dave Delvecchio. Somehow you're still muted. How'd that happen? No, can't hear you. Oh no, I can't hear you at all. Even though I watched you on mute.
How's that?
Perfect.
There we go. I just had to switch my microphone. I will say, I think, I know Otis, for example, has kind of a don't ask, don't tell policy. So this really does vary town by town. Their philosophy is short-term rentals are not allowed, but if you do it, it's only a problem if your neighbors complain. And I know that firsthand because I have a place in Otis and I have a neighbor who does Airbnb rentals who has come to me and said, if we ever have a problem, please come to me first. Don't ever go to the town and I'll be happy to, accommodate this at least until my kids graduate college because this is how I'm paying for it. So I think there's a lot of different ways that this can be structured. And I don't think it's necessarily the EDIC's role to be the ones to figure all this out. To that end, I think what we can say is, to David Kutcher's point, there is a role for short-term rentals to play in the needs of housing options in Easthampton. What that role is to be determined by zoning and the planning board, but that conceptually the EDIC is behind finding a workable solution for our community. And I think that gives us the insulation against the black eye, because what we're saying is y'all figure it out, but whatever you figure out, we're behind because there is a need that needs to be satisfied here.
Okay. All right, Cassie?
My only experience with Airbnbs was in New Orleans, where there was a lot of conversation about people partying. But like Dave said, we're not Maui, we're not New Orleans. And I believe that there is a strong need for short-term housing here so they can come spend their money in our stores. I agree with Dave.
Okay.
And I mean, and kind of, you trying to use the crystal ball, if we're going to have a problem, the most likely problem we're going to face is college students from UMass decide they want to throw a rager. And so they rent a house in Easthampton, have 300 of their closest friends come, and you end up with noise complaints and issues related to that. I do know of other towns who have said that short-term rentals have to be for a minimum period of 6 days or 7 days, so that you can't have like 1 and 2 night short term. Now, the other more likely renters, and I actually know somebody in Southampton who used to do this, is they would rent their house for graduation weekends and make more in like a 2 or 3 night rental than they would cover their mortgage payment for the month with it. So, I think that, this is where, again, if we're the ones solutioning for the way to structure this, I think those are the sorts of things that are going to have to be weighed into whatever is kind of proposed and voted upon. But I think those are the sorts of issues that have to be thought about. But I think that's outside our purview.
Yeah, in no world have I been saying I would like us to design the solution. I want to be clear about that. I don't care enough to go learn about that. I'm not going to do that. But this group, because our job is rah-rah economic development, sustainable economic development in particular, the ability to attract and retain residents of this city and business owners in this city, want to be able to decide when should we have an opinion about something out loud, and what are the times when it's worth saying more than, yeah, good idea theoretically, versus good idea theoretically, and we urge you to consider these 2 or 3 things. Like we have brought those things up in this meeting, things that we would invite people to be thoughtful about. So I think so David led this part of our conversation by saying, I think we could have a 1-sentence blanket statement. And while I agree with that, I also think it would be worthwhile to tack on, and we urge you in figuring out this solution to consider the following. Tom Brown.
You might have just answered my question, but I guess what I was thinking was, obviously we might not be able to support a proposal till we see what the proposal is. Back to Dave's point, how many days is it going to be? What are the specifics? We don't know that. But could we, if we chose, made a general statement that in principle, we support short-term housing in principle, and we don't necessarily know enough about the plan in Easthampton yet to take a position.
Yeah, I think that we could probably have iterative statements. Not probably, we definitely could. I'm sure that we have. So this has all been truly, do you guys want to submit a one-sentence statement to a group of municipal thinkers who are tasked with such thinking? And then revisit when things are less murky? Or shall we wait until there is more text on the page to react to? You like the idea of reacting to
Yeah,
something more
I agree.
specific?
I think option
Okay.
2.
All right. Then what I will do, I think, is we'll keep this topic on future agendas as things change. I will keep my eye on what is happening in zoning meetings and the ordinance committee, and we can make a decision moving forward about when we'd like to say something. Cool. I don't have anything else on the agenda. Is there anything that Dave Del Vecchio.
Cassie had inquired. I just figured I'd give you
Okay.
all an update. So
Yeah.
the chamber has made a hiring decision, and the position was accepted by a new
Ooh.
executive director. It is John Kostick. John lives in Hatfield. Comes to us after working for 17 years as like a New England regional director for U.S. Tennis Association, the group that puts on the U.S. Open. So his experience in working with municipal, parks and rec, along with privately owned tennis clubs, while driving membership both of USTA and of individual tennis players, all translate well into this position. John's lifelong regional, resident, lives in Hatfield now, born and raised in Northampton. And if the last name Kostick sounds familiar, his wife is Jen Margolis Kostick, who works in development at Cooley Dick, that some of you may know. And so, because Jen's been very involved in the business community, both in her role at Cooley Dick and previously in various sales roles. I've worked with Jen for over 20 years. She was my radio advertising rep for Rock 102 like 20 years ago. So, so we're excited. His first week is the first week of May. My plan was I will invite him to join at least the public speak section of an upcoming meeting so y'all can get a chance to meet him. I'm not sure if that's going to happen in May just because I know he's going to be drinking from the fire hose. I'll make sure you get an invitation to meet with John very soon.
Outstanding. I will make a note to ask you maybe 10 days or so before our next meeting, whether he thinks he's going to make it to May. And if not, we will tentatively put it on June. And
yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. Because then I can have him put it on his schedule to see if he can accommodate it and we can go from there.
Okay. Dave, can you spell
Thank
his
you.
last name for me, please?
Kostek. I don't know if you can hear my dogs barking in the background.
Nope.
God forbid, noise cancellation's gotten so good on these applications now.
Yeah.
But God forbid an Amazon truck drives by. That's Amazon and UPS are their mortal enemies for some reason.
They shouldn't be allowed to live. I can't believe anyone's allowing it. Okay. Love that. Thank you, Dave, for that update. Are there other topics that in May you would like to talk about that I can anticipate putting on the agenda then? All right, I will try to pick up.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, of course.
So one of the things that came up about the 385 Main Street project today was that they might want the city to work with them on a Housing Works grant.
Okay.
Which would be submitted in early June. So ideally, we would be at a point to be asking for letters of support by that point.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to pop that on the agenda just for a quick
Yep.
conversation.
Housing Works grant for May.
Mhm.
Okay. May agenda. So I will.
Sorry,
Yep.
referring,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
just jumping in. referring back to our earlier conversation about the Maple Street
Yeah.
playground. The playground equipment was removed. So that happened about a week or so ago. So the vast majority of the playground equipment was removed recently. Not sure who did it or how that came about, but it's definitely been a hazard for a long time. So I'm kind of glad that they took it down, but there were definitely a lot of community members who had voices of opinion.
They can be counted on. People are
Always.
good at sharing their voice in this community. Okay.
But if
That's
anyone's
really-
ever seen it in the last like 5 years, it was a death trap just waiting.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm not
Good info.
sure who did it, but I would guess it's DPW.
Okay. Tom Brown.
That may have been the DPW, Allison, I'm not sure, but I seem to recall that somewhere in the process of closing down the school, that equipment was sold to a third party. And it may have been a third party who bought the equipment for other use, whatever their own use. Don't take that to the bank, but I remember hearing that somewhere about that equipment being sold.
Yeah, that could very well be it.
Sure. Could have been part of that auction thing. Okay. So here's what I will do. In anticipation, oh, this is ideal. We have 5 minutes left. In anticipation of the May meeting, I will try to pick up my old habit of writing to you guys 10 days before that meeting to ask if there are things that you would explicitly like listed, what you would like to do with those, so that it's less of me on a Friday frantically trying to figure out what is EDIC and what do we talk about. So we can look forward to that. Anything else for the good of the order? No, I feel like a king when I say that to the Knights of the Round Table. All right, so then who would like to close out this meeting? Do we have a motion to shut her down?
I make a motion to
Okay.
adjourn.
Anybody got a second?
Hi.
Sure.
Fantastic.
Pick a Dave.
Great. All in favor, holler aye to adjourn. I will see you in May.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.